Hello and welcome to the Business Debate. I'm Jennifer Johnston, and today we're talking about the key issue of food security. Globally, there will be an additional 2 billion mouths to feed over the next 40 years, and how we do that is a difficult question. In trying to find solutions, the orthodox view is that the interests of smallholder farmers and corporate agribusiness are diametrically opposed. But is that necessarily the case? The world is seeing unprecedented demand for chocolate, and with major problems in the main supplier countries, many fear we're on the verge of a chocolate shortage. United Cacao aims to transform the way cocoa is produced, and its business model could challenge the orthodox view that the interests of smallholder farmers and agribusiness are always opposed. To find out more, we're joined in the studio by Dennis Melka, Chairman and CEO of United Cacao, the first publicly listed pure-play cocoa producer in the world and the first publicly listed tropical plantation company in Latin America. Dennis, welcome to the London Stock Exchange studios. Thanks for joining us.
Jen, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So how would you characterise the debate on food security?
Well, I think it's a multifaceted question, and I think at multiple levels. For the consumers, I would say it's a question about quantity and quality. People want to make sure that there's enough of the stuff, and then also of what they're consuming, that the quality is there. But I would add another dimension to it, which is on the part of the producers, that there's security for the producers, that there's a livelihood and an ability for them to produce this crop going forward. And I think when we look at the case of cacao, we have a very interesting situation, which is, I would argue, very different from other commodities. Number one, there isn't enough of the crop being produced. Number two, it's being produced generally under very horrific conditions in West Africa.
And can I ask you a bit more about the conditions in West Africa? Can you explain more about that?
Well, this has been well documented by CNN, by Stop the Traffic, numerous groups about the horrific incidences of slavery and child labor that exist in this industry. And most of the cacao produced in the world is still coming from West Africa. So this is, I think, a horrific situation for a commodity which is being consumed by people in North America and Western Europe.
So where is the demand for cacao coming from, and how is it affecting the market?
If you look, for example, at two large emerging market countries, Brazil and Indonesia, which happen to be the number 3 and number 4 producers of cacao in the world, those two countries used to be exporters of their cacao. Now they must actually import cacao to satisfy the demand for confectionery product by their middle-class population. So it's an incredible change in circumstances. The exporters have now become importers, and the whole world now is relying on Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana to supply the cacao that's needed.
Dennis, can you describe your operation in Peru and tell us what are your expectations for it?
Well, right now we have planted approximately 1,250 hectares of cacao. That makes us the largest cacao estate in Peru. We expect to hit 2,000 hectares of planted cacao by December. That'll make us the largest in Latin America. By the end of next year, our objective is to have over 3,000 hectares planted, which would make us the largest in the world. So our objective is to be the world's largest producer of ethically produced cacao.
So tell us, how does your production method differ from the traditional one?
Well, we're using an agroforestry model where we have cacao planted but interspersed with native trees that we've reintroduced into the area that had previously been logged. Our goal is to maximize productivity. So we're hoping to achieve over 3 tons of cacao per hectare at maturity, which is very different than the industry standard in West Africa of, let's say, under 1 ton, somewhere between half a ton to 1 ton. The way we're going to achieve that is by proper care and maintenance. We have an incredible team of people on the ground skilled in this crop, proper fertilization, and proper practices in the field. And for that, we've set up a program called POPEC, where we're financing them to become cacao farmers. Obviously, this is a loan from the company to them. It'll be repaid over time, so it's not a donation, but then it allows them to have a valuable plantation asset that they own, that they run, and in partnership with us, we will sell those beans overseas. So we're very excited about the program we have with the community. We've been well received there, and this is really just the early days, so the future looks quite bright for us.
Now, corporate agriculture is often seen as the enemy of smallholder farmers. Is this always the case?
Well, I think it depends on what industry you look at. And if we look at the case of cacao, this is a manually planted and manually harvested crop. So it requires huge inputs of labor. So when I look at also the interesting dynamic of cacao is the fermentation. The way to improve that is by having corporate centers of fermentation where those beans are processed to consistent standards that the buyers and chocolate companies around the world want. So a corporate infrastructure not only benefits obviously the company making the investment, but the small farmers in the area, because they are able then to take their beans to that corporate fermentation center to make sure that the bean quality is very good. So I would argue in the case of cacao, it's a win-win, where small farmers and a corporate entity can be synergistic and both benefit from each other.
Dennis, this has been hugely interesting, so thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me today. Appreciate it.